Welcome to ActiveRain University. Woohoo! We got some special guests today. And one of these gentlemen we've had on here from time to time, and this is my first time having him on a call. I'm super excited. We have Ben Kinney and Jay Papasan. So Ben is I don't know what he calls himself these days. He's a mega agent. He's got a team that does 500 plus transactions. He's got all the bells and whistles on his business, but he's really been able to kind of focus his business down. And I don't know, before Jay and Gary Keller, who's one of the co-authors of this book, actually published the one thing, I have this feeling that Ben has been using this in his business anyway. And then we've got the author of the book here with us, another guy who I have no question has been using these concepts in his life and his business for probably before they even thought about the book. So I want to welcome Ben and Jay. How you guys doing today?
Doing fabulous. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah,
glad to be here, Bob.
Yeah, I'm glad to have both you guys. So just to let everybody know, these guys are taking a break from their vacation. One of the things that you would learn about if you read the one thing is work-life balance. I think you guys call it counterbalance. There's no such thing as balance. But so these boys will be heading off into the sticks here in Washington to go fishing this weekend. Jay, you were telling me before the call that Ben's actually one up on you right now in the fishing contest. Is that right?
In the state of Washington, if we go nationwide, we're tied 2-2.
Okay. So do you have a plan this weekend for how you're going to land? You guys are fishing for salmon, is that right?
Steelhead, and I've got some nail clippers, and I'm just going to snap his line whenever possible.
Oh, he plays dirty. He plays dirty.
That sounds like
I'm in it to win it, baby.
That sounds like a pretty good deal. Okay, so again, thank you guys for joining me. Let's just start off with Jay. Can you give me a little background on where the idea from the book came from, kind of what you guys were thinking as you set out to write this book?
Man, I think that when we look up today, I don't think there's ever been a generation of people that have had more on their schedules, that have had longer to-do lists, that have had more opportunities to choose from stuff to do. And it all adds up and kind of mounts up to a kind of pressure, and the opportunity turns into pain. I mean, at one point, I looked up, I had 254 unread emails. I had countless other messages waiting for me in my voicemail and my text. It was just one of those days where you look and it's like, how am I supposed to get all of this done? And to compound it all, I literally had 2 seasons of Downton Abbey saved on my DVR, awaiting some moment in my life when I was miraculously going to have a week to watch them, because I felt like I had to. And so we kind of looked up, and everyone is trying to teach us how to be more efficient so that we can do everything on our list. And we felt like the one thing is a license for people to actually do less and achieve more in the process. And honestly, if there's one thing that has distinguished my writing partner throughout his career, it's his ability to figure out what matters most and then go do that to the exclusion of everything else. And having lived this really extensively for the last 5 years while we were working on it, I can tell you it's really liberating to say no to all that other stuff and to realize you just don't have to do it if you do the right thing.
Ben, is it actually liberating? You do this, right? You're very efficient at this. Like, I know I kind of lament, I'm like, oh, I texted Ben, he didn't text me. But has it been liberating to actually, like, in your day-to-day life, get rid of these other distractions?
You know, it's funny because, Bob, you helped us write the blogging chapter of social, and I got to write the book with Jay, and it's just ironic that we write this book on social media, and I deleted Facebook from my life in November, and I've turned off all the notifications on my phone, and most of the time my phone is on silent without even vibrate, and it's because I realized that everything else in my life was controlling my life but me. So for me, I'm trying to eliminate everything so that I can focus on what my one thing is, which is developing and building talent, as we'll probably talk about later today. So it is liberating, and I'm hoping to share this message with everybody that they turn off some of this stuff so we can get back to productivity. I think that by not doing that, we're stealing from our loved ones, our goals, our families, etc.
You know, Ben, Gary tells a story, I'm not sure if you've heard it, where when he newly married to his wife Mary, and they're sitting at the dinner table and the phone rang, and Mary looked at him and said, "Aren't you going to get that?" And he said, "No, I'm not." And it was really bugging her because the phone was ringing and he wasn't getting up to answer it. And he said, look, do you want me to go see if there's a better offer out there? Because right now I'm doing exactly what I want to do, which is spend time with you. Whatever's happening out there will wait. And he had this kind of conversation, and they kind of had a meeting of the minds that in his world, all this stuff that's around us that presents opportunities, he's just going to be in the driver's seat like you were describing. He wants to touch those things when it's appropriate to touch them, not when he's doing other things and have them distract him. It's about who's in control. Just because an alert or a bell or a whistle goes off doesn't mean we have to go running like Pavlov's dog to go answer the phone or answer a text or respond to a like on Facebook. Even if you're centering your business around those things, and I'm using Facebook really big time, but I'm only going there when it's appropriate for me to go there.
You know, Gary shared with me a story, and I'm sure he's okay with me saying this. He said, at the end of my life, I'm going to be looking back, and the thing that I'm going to be most proud of, and my goal, is that I spent as much time with my son and as much time with my wife as possible. And, and whenever possible, on top of that, I got to spend time with the people I really care about. But this world is getting so big, and social media and phones and everything, we're connected to such a large database of people. We don't realize by spending time doing all these things, we're really stealing from probably arguably the most important people in our lives, the people that we're going to regret at the end of our lives. And Jay, will you share that story that you shared with me about the phone ringing in a certain direction?
The phone. Give me another clue there, because I'm just
about our friend who husband's passed away.
Oh yeah. Recently, I had a coworker whose spouse passed away quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and at the funeral, he was the youngest of three brothers. The oldest brother gave a speech, and it was obviously a very sad occasion. But he chose to share something with us that really hit me hard, because it's something that I'm working on. And he just said that if he had a regret about his brother, he was kind of an introverted guy, you know, is that his brother was always reaching out to him. His phone rang more than his brother's did. And he was really regretting that, because now he didn't have a chance to pick up the phone and call his brother to signal him, like, I love you too. And it was very poignant, and it was a message that I needed to hear then to get back on my game, reaching out to the people that matter most to me versus waiting for them to call me.
You guys are going to get me all choked up here.
All right.
That's actually the first time I've delivered that without getting choked up, because it's a big deal. And what a gift he gave us to share that he was experiencing regret so that we could avoid it.
So, okay, so the book is it's actually a really quick read, and I read it yesterday for the second time, all the way through. I sat down, I did my one thing, I turned off all my distractions, and I literally just went right through the book. And Jay, it's like 160 pages or something, right?
Yeah, I think it's just over 200. It's a quick read with a lot of white space, though. So we designed it to read fast.
I had the PDF version, so maybe it was a little bit shorter in there. But let's go in now. Obviously, we can't in the time that we have here talk about all of the things in the book that that you guys touch on, and all of the lies and all of the stealers of your time and these different things. Let's go in and talk about a few of what you think are some of the key points of the book, or that can at least get people who are listening here today kind of an idea of what they can expect out of the book.
Awesome.
Yeah, we narrowed it down to 5 sections that we hope that Jay would talk about, and then maybe we could just talk about how maybe it's applicable in the real estate business. And Jay, these are the 5 that we picked.
Well, you know what? Why don't we go back one slide, and just in case someone hasn't read the book and isn't familiar, I'll just read the focusing question and tell them this is kind of the central tool of the book, is a question, and we put a lot of thought and research into it. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or necessary? And we call it the focusing question. You ask this question of yourself to make sure that at any given moment, in the areas of your life that matter, your work, with your family, that you're doing the most important thing. For my work, what's the biggest lever I can pull to move me forward? In my marriage, what's the most important thing I can do to make sure that this is a healthy, vibrant marriage? And you can ask this question, and in my experience, most people already know the answers, but because they haven't articulated the question, they're not really staring at it right there as, well, gosh, of course I need to go do that. So it's a very simple concept, which is why we say it's a surprisingly simple truth. But it's a habit that has to be formed, which takes some effort. It takes something from you to kind of get in the habit of saying, what's my priority right now? What's the most important thing I can be doing with my time?
Jay, I like how, because when I don't know, for me, when I look at a question like that, it seems very daunting, and I really like in the book how you guys break down and you take it from like, hey, here's your grand plan, and you really bring it back all the way to like, what could I be doing right now today, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary, and you really show how you can kind of build a plan around doing that for the day, for the week, for the month, and how you kind of build on that thing so that big, huge question out there doesn't seem so daunting.
That's actually the perfect segue, Bob, because the first place we wanted to talk about this, I believe, your first bullet, Ben, is goal setting, right? And it's this idea that we set goals, big goals, like I want to be the #1 agent in Bellingham, or I want to be the top blogger on ActiveRain. And these are goals that don't happen overnight, that you have to take focused action on a regular basis to achieve over time. And goal setting is one of the great things that we break down in here is how do you connect the dots between that someday goal and actually what you should be doing right now. And it's not something many people do naturally. It's an acquired skill, and we have a process for it. We call it goal setting to the now. And you basically ask the question, and we break it down in the book in a series of time frames. In order to achieve that someday goal, what's the one thing I need to achieve such that by doing it, everything has to be easier and necessary in the next 5 years? And we found that as far as people can look out with any clarity at all, it's about 5 years. And that's still pretty fuzzy. But you might guess, to say I wanted to be the #1 agent, that by then I would have to have a 6th-level Millionaire Real Estate Agent team, a fully functioning team with a listing branch and a buyer branch, something along those lines. That's your best guess right now. Then you'd roll it back to the year. What's the one thing I would have to accomplish this year in order to be on track for that 5-year goal? And then when you establish that milestone, what you think it should be that you're aiming at, you go to the month, then what should I be doing this week? And that's when you say, well, what's the one thing I need to be doing today? And you're asking it in the context of all those dominoes lined up. So you've got a really reasonable, good idea that, oh, wow, if I just make calls to 50 of my past clients today, I'm on track to being the #1 agent in Bellingham.
Ben, let me put you on the spot, because, okay, so
do it.
You're essentially 5 years removed from this sort of goal setting, and obviously your goals change as you go, but 5 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago when you were starting out and you were looking and saying, I mean, 'cause I think you were, I want to be that #1 agent in Bellingham. Walk me back maybe at a year or at a month or on that first day. And I know you didn't have this kind of mindset from the book anyway, but you had it kind of innately, I think. Walk me back and kind of try to lay out for me what that would look like in your head reflecting on it.
I remember, showing up to my first office meeting and seeing people talk about their production and seeing the top agents in the office, and I just decided that day that I wanted to be that agent in the office. And before I even got there, I realized that I was going to get there. And from that point, I realized that I wanted to be the top agent in the region. And from there, before I even got there, I realized that I was on momentum and pace to be the top agent in the nation and in our company. And
so that's one of the things they talk about in the book, you guys talk about, Jay, is you have to believe it from the outset. And anybody that's met Ben knows that he believed it on day one, even though he didn't necessarily know all the steps to get there, but he believed that that was going to be the case.
Yeah, it sounds a little arrogant.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to believe in the goal on some level, but I'll tell you, we set out with this book 5 years ago with outrageous goals. And you can believe that it's possible, but maybe not even probable, right? When you break the goal down to, I need to make 50 calls today, now you've broken it down and chunked it down logically to something that I absolutely can, I know that's possible for me. I just have to stick my head down and do it. That's the whole point, I think, of breaking down the goal, is to get to a point where you're not shutting down with, oh, I'm not good enough or I'm not experienced enough, to something that you absolutely can achieve today, and it actually is lining up with where you want to go.
In the beginning, we talked about, I was trying to figure out how could I do it, and for me, it was internet lead gen. Mm-hmm. And I broke it all the way down to what you see on the screen, which is which is how many visitors do I need to generate a lead, and how many leads do I need to generate an appointment, and how many appointments do I need to generate a closing. And that takes away this it's like, I guess, creating a map to where you want to go, because it's just mathematical. You know, if you walk the 10,000 steps a day and you do that 7 days a week, you'll hit some of your health goals. It's just how do you make it into digestible little chunks.
That's absolutely right. And you know, when you probably first did your math on the visitors, your math was probably completely wrong. But within a couple of months, you were able to course adjust and get it right. I think if people really want to have a crystal ball, but I think just doing the math, it gets you on a set of metrics, something you can measure and do, and then you just kind of work it out as you go. It's not that complicated, but you do have to kind of follow this process so you can say, well, what am I focused on? I'm focused on visitors.
You know, I'm working on getting in shape myself, and I went running the other day with thanks for laughing, with Nick, and Nick and I have been walking every day and to get 10,000 steps, and I realized that I'm so impatient that now that I'm getting my 10,000 steps, I want to get them sooner, so I'm not wasting time. So now we're running. But as you start to run, it hurts because I want to puke mostly. But you start realizing that, hey, tomorrow I could probably make it a little bit farther. And Jay, it just reminds me of the next thing on our list, which is the domino effect. How these little things build up to something massive. Walk us through this.
Well, the metaphor we use in the book for doing your one thing over time and how it pays off in just a huge way is dominoes. Everybody's lined up dominoes and knocked them over. And so you intuitively get, if I do one thing, the right thing, I can make more things happen. You know, I'll knock over this domino and 10 more will fall down. There was a group in the Netherlands that actually lined up the world record, and it's 4.5 million. So you can imagine knocking over one domino and having 4.5 million more fall down. So it's this idea that one thing can disproportionately lead to results. And another guy went out and did the research, and that's what's there, and he figured out that a 2-inch domino can knock over a domino that's 50% bigger, a 3-inch domino. And the 3-inch domino actually has enough mass and force to knock over a 4.5. And if you take that out to its logical end, he did it in reality. He built them up to 10, and then he kind of ran out of steam. But you get to 18, and you'd be higher than the Tower of Pisa. By 23, you'd be way above the Eiffel Tower. By 31, you'd be 3,000 feet above Mount Everest, and by 57, you'd almost have a domino that would reach all the way to the moon. And it's this geometric progression. And the way I can best illustrate, like a concrete example of real-life action, in 1997, I ran a marathon for the first time, and only time, actually, not to imply I've done it since. But at that time, I'd never run a road race, and I had less than 4 months to prepare to run it. And there's a simple Runner's World guide, and basically it says, today you do one thing, you run 1 mile. And the next day you look at your little sheet and it says, now run 1 mile again. And then it's 1.5 miles, and then you go back to 1. And then you take a day off, and then you run 2. And the next week you start over, but everything is just a little bit faster and farther. So it's 1.5 miles, 1.5 miles to 2.5 miles. And you look up 5 or 6 weeks into it, and I remember coming home to my roommate, and he goes, how far did you run today? And I said, oh, about 14 miles. And I was rushing out the door to go on a date with my future wife, and he goes, dude, wait, do you realize that you just ran a half marathon? And I had no idea. And the dominoes, I'd just been lining them up, doing one thing every day, which is just run a specific distance, and it just got a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. And really ordinary people, myself, I'm a very ordinary runner, can do extraordinary things like running a marathon by just following a plan and lining up the dominoes.
Jay, in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, there's a story about doubling a penny.
Mm-hmm.
Will you walk me through that, or you have another analogy, whichever one you want?
Well, it's a kind of a famous story about a guy who's negotiating. I think the actual story is about an inheritance. I've heard it 2 ways, but basically you have a choice. I'll give you $1 million, or you can have a penny, and I'll just double it every day for 30 days. And the idea of a penny doubled every day is staggering how quickly it grows. Actually, by the 31st day, it's over $10 million. And most people just can't get their head around that sort of compounding. And when Gary told it in The Millionaire Agent, he and his son had been listening to this on an audio tape, and he looked up and his son was gone, and he was inside with a notebook and paper trying to add it up manually, right? Because it blows your mind when you see how things add up so quickly if you're just doing the right thing again and again.
In the book, or Jay, you guys talk about delayed gratification, and that, I mean, that's kind of the idea there, right? Like, people can't even wrap their head around a penny becoming $10 million when they've got $1 million sitting in front of them right now, and even though they could go back and do the math and probably figure it out for themselves, that idea that they can't delay the gratification is super powerful. I mean, and for most people, it's probably more powerful than they're able to do. So either one of you guys, Ben maybe, how are you able to kind of delay the gratification so that you can get these dominoes stacking up? Like, what part of, is it something inside you? Like, what do you look at to be able to delay gratification like that? Because we have a lot of things around us each day that could take our time, or that we could be doing that are probably more fun than sitting down and making your 30 calls, or sitting down and figuring out how you're going to get that next visitor to your website.
You know, I think that the mistake that we make, and especially in this industry, and especially in these tough last 6 years of economic downturn, is that we get so torn away or so unclear on what our end goal is that we have nothing to look forward or nothing to work towards. When you walk into my bedroom, my vision board on a whiteboard, it's drawn up there with all the things I want to create in the businesses that I want to run. When you open my phone, my goals are on my phone that I see every single day. I want a business worth this. I want this much in reserves. I want to give away all the jobs that I don't want to do. I want to help 10 people become millionaires. I want to be married but only once. I want to create something that I'll be remembered for. My goals are right in front of me. So every single day I get to ask myself the question, is this allowing me to get to where I want to go? Because I'm honest with myself that I really want to get there. And I know that every decision I make gets me closer, it takes me further away from that. And that's what keeps me going, because I'm reminding myself every day what I want in the future.
You have big goals, Ben, and I think, you know, we've been doing this for a while. We went out to the RainCamps and stuff, and I hear from a lot of people like, I don't think I could ever have those. I would never want to have a team that's doing 500 transactions. And so, but I mean, these same things apply even if your goals aren't the crazy big goals that you have, right? I mean, they're like, if I want to do 50 transactions this year in my business, I mean, that's right. There's no difference between those massive goals and
yeah, we have this concept.
Pedestrian goals, I guess.
We have this concept that I like to share with people, especially when I'm teaching in person, and it's called right sizing. How do I right size the goal that's for the individuals in the audience? Because you may want to do 1,000 transactions, or you may want to do 50. That's up to you. Don't disregard the content or the message because it's too big or too small for you. Just make it the right size for your life. The big myth is that by doing more, you actually have less. I spend less than 10 hours a week working on my real estate business, and I invest the other amounts of my time working on the other things that we have going on. So it doesn't mean that you have less of a life. Actually, it means that you have more of one.
I love that idea of right-sizing, Ben, because the things that we're describing here are absolutely the methods. It's the way that you can make really big things happen, but they work on any size goal. It's just a process that if you can internalize, you know, this is the best way to achieve what I want to achieve. It's just a way for you to make those things happen, whether they're really short, small goals or really big ones. It's a great process to kind of internalize.
And that's something that, I mean, the one thing is I don't know, you take it at an outside glance, it's about this kind of big master goal in your life. But like you just said, Jay, the reality is you can use this thing in small steps. You can use it to figure out how you're going to, you know, organize your week, or, I mean, there's so many applications to it, big and small.
Well, they just did a study, and it was pretty cool. And they, you know, a lot of people in this business, we talk about visualizing the end, right? You know, visualize yourself winning or taking the listing. And someone wanted to explore that, so they got a bunch of graduate students that were about to take an exam, and they asked them to visualize themselves getting an A on that test. And then they asked another group of people to visualize the process for earning an A on that test. And then they saw what happened. And they both spent the same amount of time visualizing. They just, one was focused on the process to achieve what they wanted, and the other one was just focusing on the feeling they would have when they got there. And the people who visualized the process, breaking down a goal, lining up the dominoes, they studied earlier, they studied longer, and they actually earned higher grades. And so it's just about training your mind to break down your goals in an efficient way. It's a wonderful life skill to have, and it's something, as a parent, I've got a 7 or 8-year-old. I'm like, how can I teach this to my kids? I don't care if it's learning how to be a better soccer player or win at Halo, whatever it is their goals right now. How can I help them make this the process that they use, because it scales to however big a goal you want for your life.
All right, Ben, what's lesson number 3?
Well, it's time blocking. Jay, walk us through this.
Well, I mean, I think the image on the left, the typical day, describes a lot of what our real estate lives look like. You run around with your hair on fire. You take 1 million calls. You answer 1 million questions. You get home, and your spouse or your roommate asks, how was your day? And you're like, oh, my gosh, and you just collapse into your favorite chair, and they're like, well, what happened? And you can't articulate what it is that you actually accomplished. You were just incredibly busy. The idea of time blocking is that you start your day by making an appointment with yourself for several hours to do whatever it is that's most important, the one thing for your work. And then you do that before you allow chaos to enter your life. And the people who do that live on the right side. They make sure that the one thing gets done, and then they can deal with everything else. I like the way Gary says this. The most successful people in this world, they're not out to be focused all day. They're trying to have a great day before noon.
Oh. I don't know who said this quote. It's somebody a lot smarter than me, but they said the rich have learned to use time.
It's your most precious asset.
Yeah.
How you invest it will determine more about your future, your health, your happiness, and your relationships than anything else, right? I mean, it sounds kind of existential. Let's all go meditate on the mountain, but it's absolutely true. I shared this with you, Ben. One of my coworkers and friends keeps a plaque on the wall, and it's the number 1440, and that's the number of minutes in a day. And he keeps that where he can see it all day long, just to remind him that how he invests those minutes are the determiner for his future. And he's determined to invest as many of them well as possible every day. And I think that's really cool. He's got that awareness. He walks in knowing, this is my most precious resource. How am I going to spend it today?
Do we need to time block all of our day?
Absolutely not. If
That's
you
a
did
myth,
that,
right?
you would drive yourself crazy. The way I tell people to get started is when you show up at your office, whatever your work environment is, instead of going straight to email, instead of going to social media, or even going to the coffee pot and chatting with coworkers, go to your desk with everything still powered down and open up your calendar. Before you even get to ActiveRain, you go there and you look at your calendar and say, what is it what's the most important thing I can do today? What's the one thing I can do today? Hopefully it's already time blocked on your calendar. Do that first before you turn over your life to other people's priorities. Because when you open up your email, that's pretty much what you're doing. You're allowing the urgent to rule your morning instead of what's most important.
So Jay would never do this because he's way too classy, but I mean, obviously he would love it if you guys went out and bought the book. We're going to give you guys, as Jay and the publisher have been super awesome, we're going to give you guys a couple of downloads right after the call where you can go in and grab like a little PDF snapshot of a few of the chapters, and one of them is the time blocking chapter. I mean, it's super important that you be able to block your, I mean, I'm saying this, I shouldn't be the one delivering this message, but Ben, give me a little bit of an idea of what are some of the things that you do to allow yourself to be able to block out portions of time, like you turn your phone off, do you disconnect the internet, like what are some things, maybe I think Jay calls them hacks, what are some hacks that you do that allow you to be able to really time block?
Well, Jay and I share a lot of the same habits, but my phone is always on vibrate, and many times it's turned to silent. I have no notifications that push through to my phone. I force myself to have to log into my email through my browser instead of having email on my phone that pops up. I let almost everything go directly to voicemail because most things can be handled with a text or forwarded to somebody else. I encourage everybody to text me, and then I get to it when I possibly can. You gotta remove all those distractions. I put signs on my door when I'm working on my one thing, and we have a schedule in real estate, especially on my team. At 8:30, you better be in the office because we practice our scripts and dialogues from 8:30 to 8:50, and Jay got to see that this morning, that we start up, when we power up in the morning, we go through it. And then all of us in the morning, we time block until 11 or 12 prospecting. And that's, for some of my agents, that's calling their sphere, and for some of them, it's calling canceled expireds, and for others, it's calling internet leads, and for me, it's calling, trying to find talent for the team and for the other companies. But we all have our one thing time blocked. But you can't do it if you allow all these distractions, and that really gets into the next lesson, which is multitasking. And I asked Jay to talk earlier today to me about how much productivity is lost through this multitasking. And Jay, since it's 3 guys on the call today, what is really true? Are women better multitaskers than men? Let's just get it. Let's get it recorded. Let's have everybody know today. Let's get it out there so we all know.
And we can watch it all explode. I'll say this. No one can effectively multitask. Anyone who thinks they are is just fooling themselves. There's this myth around there that women, because they took care of the babies while harvesting the wheat, while we were out hunting mastodon, they were bred, so to speak, to multitask, and it's completely untrue. And there's countless scientific studies that can prove this.
So does that mean that when a girlfriend says that they're better at multitasking than you, that they are actually saying they're better at something that doesn't even exist?
They're effectively saying that they're better at being lousy than you are, but I would never say that. I would say, awesome, honey, go to it. I'm smart. I would never contradict my wife. She actually fought me on this for a long time, and it was funny. Wendy was a good sport about it, but I showed her the research, we talked through, and it took her a long time to come around because we're all so used to multitasking. We hear that it's a good thing. There's something like 360,000 blog posts out there about how to do it right. But what's actually happening when we think we're multitasking, Ben, is we're switch tasking, which is the graphic you have up there. And you're doing one thing, you decide to do something else, you switch, and that's just instantaneous. And the thing that we don't realize is that we have to reorient whatever we're doing. There's rules of the game. If you're folding clothes, there's rules for doing that for your brain, and there's rules for watching TV. And when you switch, there's a little tiny blip of time that's lost. Anywhere from a very low amount for things that are very simple, but if you're doing complex things like working on a BPO or a budget and then have to settle a dispute between your 2 children or 2 coworkers, huge amounts of time can be lost. And researchers tell us that 28%, more than a quarter of the average workday, is lost to this switching time. Just time that's lost. You're not even aware that it went out the door. So when we think we're multitasking, we're actually losing time. And I shared this kind of story with your team this morning. We're actually dumbing the work down. They gave a large group of people an IQ test, and they divided them into 3 groups. And one group was told to focus and take the IQ test. Another group was told to do email and phone calls while they were doing it. And I love this. The third group, they let them be stoned while they did it, literally high on marijuana. And then they measured the results. Unsurprisingly, the people who were focused scored on average 10 IQ points higher than the other 2 groups. What was surprising is the people who were stoned scored on average 6 points higher than the people who were multitasking. So when you're multitasking, you're worse than stoned in doing your job. Not only are you losing time, but you're incredibly dumbing things down.
Remember, kids, don't do drugs.
Yes.
Don't multitask.
There we go.
Unless you're in Washington, it's legal.
And this is your brain on multitasking.
Right.
That's funny. That's funny. So Jay, you said that approximately 20% of your productivity is lost every day on multitasking. 28%. A third. Pretty much a third. So if you feel like you're making 60% of your potential income, this is probably why.
Especially for the people on this call, I'm assuming we've got a high percentage of people that consider themselves tech agents if they're on an ActiveRain call, right? They're into blogging. They like to work in the computer environment. If they've got Twitter beeping up on their second monitor the entire time, it's unbelievable. I bet it's a lot more than a quarter of their day that gets lost to distractions. And the key there is to create moments in your day where you do get to check in there. One of your teammates asked me today, it's like, well, it's impossible to stay focused all day. And that's true. So pick windows when you're going to do that. I don't know about you, Ben, but for me, even when we were writing the book, I created windows where I could effectively go into social media and interact and then windows where I wouldn't do it. I'd go in the morning, I'd go in sometime around lunchtime when I was going to take a break anyway, and I would go in towards the end of the day before I went home. And those were almost a reward system for me. You know, I'd go in there, I would do my work around it, and I'd also have a little fun, and then I'd get back to my other work. And when I'm effectively working, I have to work on a computer, and I just keep two browsers. I have one, Firefox, that I have all of my passwords on for my email and my social media, and I have one, Chrome, that I have none of that. It's just for searching the internet, for doing research for my writing. And when I'm in my work mode, I shut down Firefox so I'm not tempted to go to any of these things and distract myself from my work.
Jay, give me a hack for this. I mean, because I think a lot of people just, these things are, again, maybe you just did give the hack, but these things are everywhere. You know, they're on our phone. They're you know, if you have your computer open and your browser's up, your Facebook's there, like, is it just simply a matter of saying, like, I'm going to eliminate these things from what I'm trying to do right now?
That's absolutely it. I don't care if you multitask on the weekends. If you're folding clothes and watching TV, who cares if you're less effective at both of those, right? That's not how you earn your money. But when you're doing your work, the most important work that you have to do, you should never be multitasking. So you're just trying to create a little island of focus in your day. I mean, most of our environment, modern environment, is geared to get us to multitask. So it's really hard to avoid, and we're even hardwired to do it. We couldn't have survived this long if we couldn't notice the tiger sneaking up in the grass while we were cooking the mastodon. I mean, we're hardwired to be distracted. But when we're doing our most important work, how can you create a bunker of safety where people won't distract you and where you won't distract yourself? And there's tons of stuff in the book. It's in the productivity section that we're going to share for you. But for me, the first thing I did was that, like Ben, as soon as he shared with me that, I turned off all the notifications on my phone. When I'm really in the zone, I don't need my phone to vibrate and tell me that my daughter's game I have to feed the dinosaurs, right?
Because
it's really ridiculous.
Literally, if you don't, even if you don't respond to it right there, just the fact that you looked over at your phone, you picked it up, you read it, you sat it back down, I mean, you've lost time there.
And you've lost momentum. If you've ever really been in the zone, you know how you're just into the work and you're writing and you've lost sense of time. You get jarred out of that. It takes time to get that momentum back. And so it's like hitting the brakes on the highway. Have you ever been in like a big, long traffic jam and you're just praying to everybody in front, if we'll all just go 30 miles an hour and no one taps their brakes, we won't have this chain reaction that makes us all, you know, stutter to a halt? Yeah. That's your momentum when you're working. You don't want to tap the brakes.
You know, that the next lesson is the 80-20 rule, and it's probably one of the most important things that we could learn. Jay, walk us through the history of the 80-20 rule, and then let's talk about how it's applicable to what we have going on.
Well, it's a pretty simple principle, and it basically says that a minority of your efforts will yield the majority of your results. It was originally written about by a guy named Vilfredo Pareto. It was a 19th century Italian economist who was studying wealth and figured out that 80% of the wealth in Italy was held by 20% of the people. It wasn't popularized until the 1930s when a guy named Joseph Duran, who was a quality control engineer at the time at GM, was shown some research on executive compensation, and very offhandedly the guy who was sharing it with him said, and this follows the work of that guy, Vilfredo Pareto. And Duran, who was a quality control engineer, immediately goes, wow, that's a greater truth than just that. 80% of the defects come from 20% of the flaws on any assembly line. He just immediately knew the truth of it and started digging into it. And when he wrote his kind of seminal work, which is called the Quality Control Manual, which was adopted all through World War II and the rebuilding of Japan, I mean, it was the Bible for doing efficiency in factories. He championed this idea of Pareto's principle, which is how we got the 80-20 rule. It's really tied to the one thing. What we want people to do is ask, what's the one thing I can do, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? You're looking for that big lever, that thing, that minority of work that will give you the most majority of your results. And you just keep asking it until you get to one thing. So of the few things that really matter, what's the one thing that I can do that will matter most today?
Ben, take me back 5 years to your business starting to blossom. Can you put your finger on where you spent that 20% of your effort?
You know, I think it changed a lot Bob, from time to time because I had different priorities. In the beginning, my first, God bless you guys at ActiveRain, I learned SEO and building my online presence through reading other agents' information on ActiveRain and blogging, and that gave me the leads that I needed to start doing what I was doing. After that, my one thing was getting listings. And then after I learned to get listings, it was pricing them right. And then after the market went down, it was price reductions. And then over time, it's changed. And then it became talent and finding people. And now, I look across the nation right now, and the market's changing. And we have a lot of what I call genius agents. And these are agents that say, I'm a genius because the first quarter of this year, my business has doubled. I've never been busier. Today, I'm just the smartest agent out there. And I just want to remind you guys, probably what's happening for most agents' businesses is for the last 1 to 2 years, we've been out collecting listings. We got people to list with us in 2011, 2012, and we begged them to extend, and we begged them to keep with us. And now all of a sudden, the market changes, inventory is dropping, and every listing that we have is selling. And what happens when we do that is we've been cashing the checks from the work that we did over the last 2 years. So now we all think we're smart. But what happens, we're seeing, is that all the agents' inventory is gone, and they made a lot of money, but now they have nothing left to sell. They're a store without anything on their shelves. So the next one thing, and the thing I beg you guys on the call to start thinking about is how do I get my listing inventory up? The best way to make sure that you can get an offer accepted in a multi-offer situation is to guarantee that you're representing the seller, because then you can get your buyers to pay the most amount of money so that they get the home and your seller nets the most. Listings are the one thing for 2013. Listings generate leads. With enough leads, you need leverage. With enough leverage, you can get more listings. It's a vicious cycle. So that's it for the moment.
And I won't dispute it. I absolutely think that it's your top priority in your business is to lead generate, and you want to lead generate for listings. That's absolutely true, Ben.
All right, so we're getting close here to the end of what I had scheduled. I have there's a couple of pieces in the book for me that really hit home, and so I want to maybe just get your thoughts on them, Jay. The biggest one for me, and I think it was, you guys have a section in there where you talk about like robbers of your time or something. I forget the exact. Say it again.
The thieves.
Yeah, the thieves, exactly. And one of them is chaos. And so with the idea being that as you do this, as you start to block time out, and I think in the book you guys suggest 4 hours, but as you start to block time out and really focus on your one thing, it's bound to happen that around you chaos will ensue because, right, you can't respond to that email, you can't pick that phone call up, the little things that you would have been multitasking and thinking that throughout the day you were getting done are not necessarily getting done. Talk about that chaos, because for me that's probably the most scary thing as I realize like the chaos that's going to ensue if I'm able to time block and focus on the one thing.
I think people fundamentally are geared one of two ways. They're kind of people-oriented or task-oriented, and I'm with you. I don't know which way you're oriented. I lean towards the task. So this fear of chaos is a huge one for me. When I make the commitment to go into my time block and do my most important work, the metaphor I give for it is kind of like if you've ever watched one of those movies where they're in a diving bell and they're going way too deep, and you hear the pressure building up and things start to creak and the glass starts to crack and water starts jetting in, and the longer you're in there, the more pressure that builds, and you feel like it's eventually going to implode because you feel all the stuff piling up around you while you're doing this one thing. And it's a very real fear. And what I've watched people, and we've done case study after case study with people doing this, the first ways they kind of sabotage their own one thing, the time blocks they did, is they rush out of their bunker where they're working and they get sniped. They're so afraid that the world is on fire outside the door that they rush out there to make sure everything's okay, and that's when they actually get caught up in stuff and never get back to their work. So you just have to make peace with it. I tell people to have a little faith that they've decided, like Ben said, they're going to lead generate for listings today, that is the most important thing, and that they are right now earning checks for their future, and that everything else out there, it absolutely should be waiting. Not only can it wait, but it should wait. It takes a little bit of an act of faith to get through that, but over time, you learn how to deal with it. But for me, it's a very, very real one. And I mentioned people on the other side. I think the other thief that's just really big for people in our industry, it's the inability to say no. When you say yes to something, like lead generating for listings, you're really saying yes to it. You need to understand that you're saying no to everything else for at least a period of time. The only way I can kind of equate that to, like, for me, a visceral time, when I said yes to my wife, Wendy, I was very clear that I was saying no to every other woman that I would ever meet. It was a very big yes. And when you say yes to something, that's your one thing, you're surrounding it with no's, and you have to get comfortable and creative with how you can say no to the people around you. Yes, I'll do that, but I'm going to do it later after I'm done here. You create barriers and ways to work around it. Those are the two big thieves for me, Bob.
Yeah. I don't know. There's probably not a lot of folks on the call that would disagree, although most of us haven't gotten into that fear of chaos because we haven't focused on that one thing, I would guess. And I'm going to let these guys go. Jay, Ben, I really appreciate you guys joining us.
Hey, thanks for everybody for being on the call. Thanks for hosting it, Bob. And thanks for interviewing me, Ben. I appreciate that.
Okay. Talk to you guys all later. Thanks for being on our call today.